All right, hello everyone. Just wanted to put together a quick little supplemental video showing you how to read in records from a CSV file, but using arrays to read the fields in from each individual record. So I've gone back and dug up the Lesson 4 CSV input project that we put together a couple of weeks ago, and I just wanted to revisit this and just change the parts here that we currently have in place that utilize string methods to go through the record and parse out the fields using commas as delimiters. And I just want to show you quickly how you can achieve the same result, but much more efficiently and easier by utilizing some string methods again, but also effectively converting the record into an array of string fields, which is much simpler. So just to refresh you on how this program works, we basically give the user the opportunity to enter in the name of a CSV file that they'd like to read into the program, and then the file is read one record at a time, and we simply just display the fields in each individual record out to the screen. So that's all this does. It doesn't store the values anywhere or do any kind of arithmetic or anything. It just reads in records and displays them to the screen. So a quick demo run of it here again so we can see what that looks like. I've got a file called test.csv, and so when we enter that as the file, the records are read in, and we can see each record has 3 fields. So field 1, 2, and 3, and then the next record, fields 1, 2, and 3. So we'll still have this same output, but I'll show you a different way of taking these records in and parsing them into the individual fields. Okay. So scrolling down here, the parts of this program that we're going to have to affect the changes to are inside the actual read loop. So while there's records to read in from the reader, what we've had here is a count of the number of records, and we display record 1, 2, 3, etc. And then this is the part that's gonna ultimately be changed. So we'll read in a line from the file, and that line will be a record, and in the record there'll be any number of comma delimited fields. But rather than having to track the field count here and then asking, hey, is there any length left in the record string as a whole? Look for the index of a comma if it's the first or last field, etc. We can kind of get rid of all of that and just do it quite simply by converting the record into a field. So we want to display, field 1, 2, 3, etc. But we can get rid of some stuff. So I'm going to just basically, and you can, if you wanted to keep this code around, you could. Oops. I'm just going to comment it out. Well, I'll delete it. You can comment it out or just like copy and paste a copy of this program if you like. But I'm going to get rid of that and show you how we can update this. So this part still remains. We read a line in from the file. And so given our test example, test CSV file, a record could look something like the following. So it'll come in as a string that looks something like Jane Doe, and then there was some kind of number afterwards. So this is what record will look like when we read it in from the file. And rather than doing substrings and index of commas, we can actually take advantage of a string method called split. So if we look at record, which is a string, and we pull this up, you'll see that there's a split method. And what the split method does, if we get a track on here, is it splits a string into substrings, which is what we want, and it says that are based on the characters in the separator array. So there's a number of overloads for this particular method. What I care about is splitting the string that we have into substrings delimited by commas. So if we call the split method and pass in the character of a comma, what that'll do is it'll take this string, and everywhere we see a comma, it's going to pull out a substring. So we'll get 1, 2, 3 substrings, and it will return an array of strings. So we'll get those 3 individual substrings as 3 elements of an array. And then we can just easily pluck them out, loop through them, or do whatever it is we need to do with them. So what I'm going to do is create a reference for that here locally. So we can say I'm going to have a string array. Again, I'll just call it fields. and I'm going to assign fields the array that gets returned from this split method call. Okay, so now after this happens, what we'll have inside of fields will be an array that looks something like the following. Right? So record will be this string, and after we split it on commas and assign that array to fields, we'll have an array that has these 1, 2, 3 fields in it. And so no index of, no substring calls, nothing like that. We just automatically get the fields. Now, if you wanted to do some arithmetic or treat this particular field as a number, so an int or a double, depending on what it is, that's no different than how we currently get doubles and integers from the console. We just simply use an int.parse or a double.parse, and that'll convert that string into the number that we want. So in this example, we're just going to display it out to the screen, but you could treat that data once you've pulled it in any way that you need to. So what I'll do is, since this is an array and we can get the length of the array and therefore know how many fields are in it, we don't need an explicit field counter variable. We can just loop through the array and display each individual field. So it's going to look something like the following. We can create a for loop. We'll create a local index variable to loop through the indices. So there's index, so if we want to be, again, explicit about it, we have index 0, we have index 1, and we have index 2. So those are the indices that we'll have for this particular array. And so the length is 3, index values 0, 1, and 2. So while our index counter is less than the length, of our fields array, we're going to take our index counter and we're going to add 1 to it. And so here we can do our console dot write line, and we could do something like, I can't remember exactly what it said, but something like field, and then we have the field value. So in this case, the index can be used to represent the field. So 0, I don't want it to say 0, I want it to say 1. So we can take our index value and add 1 to that, and we can format that something like follows. So it would be, field 1, and field 2, field 3, etc. And then we can put the field value in here as well. So that will just come from our fields array at the current index location. So that's that. We'll give this a run and see what happens. I think it should be good. So we're prompted here for our input file. Again, I'm using my test CSV, and there we go. The exact same output that we had previously, albeit with, I think, a lot less work, right? So this is a format for reading in CSV files that you could use. So in your assignments, if you're tasked with reading in CSV files, I would recommend this over the previous approach. There's nothing wrong with the previous approach, using string methods, index of, substring, they work, but this is just as valid. I think is a bit easier to wrap your mind around, and requires just less work overall. So give that a shot, play around with it, see what you can do with it. But I think you'll find it's much easier to utilize now that we know about arrays, this particular method of reading in records from a file. So that's it. Happy coding.